Hello everyone, Fred here. In this installment of TPP Dynamite, I'm going to be explaining why the DCU should not have started with Creature Commandos. First things first though, if you haven't already, let me encourage you to subscribe to my channel. I'm currently approaching 450 subscribers and am really trying to make it to 500 by the end of this year. I post film, book, and TV series reviews. I do opinion pieces on entertainment, news, and affairs. I'm also an author of adult and young adult mystery novels. I recently released a new short mystery called The Intruder. There's a link to it in my video description below, and I encourage you to check it out as well. With that in mind, and without further ado, I'm going to just jump right into it. So first, I'm going to toss a disclaimer here. This is not, and I repeat, not my review of either Creature Commandos episodes 1 and 2 or Creature Commandos as a whole series. I likely will be doing a review of the show, but only once all 7 episodes have aired. It's actually one of my gripes with this show that its episodes are only between about 22 and 25 minutes long, that there are only 7 of them, that they're telling one continuous story, and that we're still only getting 1 episode a week. That's a trend that I have never liked in streaming, how executives treat it like network television and air it piecemeal despite how most of it is clearly intended to be binged in 1 or maybe 2 sittings. I don't like it with this series, especially because of how its runtime is even briefer than most streaming shows. I'm just not going to go through the dance of getting invested week after week for fewer than 30 minutes of content to review drip by drip. So I'm not going to be reviewing Creature Commandos before it has all aired for me to watch at once, as intended by the creator. Nevertheless, judging by what I've seen and heard of episodes 1 and 2, I do feel confident in saying that launching the DCU with this series was a major misstep by Warner Brothers Discovery for 4 main reasons. First, Creature Commandos is a TV/streaming series. It is not a good idea to run a cinematic universe, much less start a cinematic universe expecting the same audience that'll watch theatrical films set in that universe to also watch TV series set in the same universe, or vice versa. TV shows and cinematic universes should be affected by the movies of that universe, but should not themselves affect the movies of that universe. The TV audience and film audience are 2 very separate entities. There's always some crossover for sure. Some people who watch the movies will also be watching the shows and vice versa, but the overlap usually is negligible, because paying audiences who have 2 or 3 hours to spend watching a few movies a year don't have weeks or months to spend following several more TV series per year. Because even if they do have the time, they may just not want to spend it keeping up with those series like homework projects. This was honestly a big part of why the MCU Phase 4 and 5 failed. Kevin Feige suddenly decided to toss a legion of cut-rate MCU streaming shows on Disney Plus and make them required viewing for people who wanted to enjoy future MCU movies. And those shows did perform well with very small, very niche portions of the same audience that enjoyed MCU films, but the majority of MCU moviegoers never even heard of those shows or the characters in them, because guess what? Most MCU fans were just interested in seeing and following the movies. They weren't spending hours on the internet paying attention to Kevin Feige's press releases about how the MCU streaming series would be required viewing for the movies. They didn't have D+ subscriptions, they were just invested in the movies. So when movies like Doctor Strange 2 or The Marvels came around, being predicated upon WandaVision or Miss Marvel or the show that will not be named, audiences were rightfully so taken out of the film-going experience by wondering just what on earth was happening. Why Wanda was suddenly evil, or who on earth Monica Rambeau or Miss Marvel even were, or why Nick Fury was suddenly in space. And now James Gunn is basically making Kevin Feige's same mistake by announcing that the DCU will consist of TV/streaming series that'll heavily inform the movies. And worse, James Gunn is starting the DCU with one of those series in Creature Commandos, as opposed to waiting until after Phase 3 like Kevin Feige did. And in fact, Superman, Mr. Terrific, Peacemaker, and Starfire make their DCU debuts in an apocalyptic vision in Creature Commandos, in which they're all depicted as dead. Just, it is not wise on James Gunn's part to expect that everyone who follows the DCU films will be a diehard who will also show up to follow DCU TV or streaming series. History has proven that they probably won't be. Second, Creature Commandos is created for a very exclusive audience. Creature Commandos is very much so a James Gunn production. James Gunn wrote every episode of this show and is its primary executive producer. And anyone who knows James Gunn knows that when it comes to doing especially comic book projects, James Gunn cannot write it unless it includes an ensemble cast of usually C or D tier characters who are largely unknown to half the audience, an abundance of irreverent and childish humor of the sort that you usually have to be a horny teenager to appreciate, as much casual bloody violence as the project will allow, and literally as much cursing as can feasibly be included. After all, this is the same James Gunn who bragged about putting the MCU's first F-bomb into the Guardians of the Galaxy 3 like it was a lifetime achievement. So wouldn't you know it, Creature Commandos is a show whose main stars are C to D tier comic book characters who will be unknown to half the audience. It is a show with a very hard R rating. It is very irreverent, very deliberately. There is an abundance of bloody violence. There is an abundance of cursing. There is an abundance of butt and genitalia jokes. There was a literal act of SA between Rick Flag Sr., who is implied to be in his 50s, and someone who presents as an underage girl young enough to be his granddaughter. And in irreverent James Gunn fashion, it is played up like a joke. There is an act of S between a human being and a living corpse who is implied to be like a daughter to said human being. There is a centuries-long series of stalking acts committed by one immortal male character against an immortal female character that is played like a joke and set to music in a montage. Simply put, this show is not for everyone. It's for the maturest of adults, and most members of even that limited audience likely won't be enchanted by its juvenile and generally cringe-worthy style. And seeing as this show is supposed to be the first project in the DCU and a project that will majorly impact further DCU movies and shows down the line, that's probably not going to impress people who are looking for a reason to start following or even keep following the DCU. And that's a big problem, because the main goal of a cinematic universe, especially one like the MCU or the DCU, is to draw in as big a crowd as possible. Studios primarily achieve that goal by getting audiences to come and see the universe's theatrical films. That's why most of those films are PG-13 rated, tend to appeal to the whole family, and tend to be movies that parents can watch with their kids. Creature Commandos, meanwhile, is not for families. It's not for kids or even many adults. So Creature Commandos, as the DCU's first project, is not going to be a major positive promotion for future DCU theatrical films or further DCU content in general. Third, Creature Commandos isn't even that good. There's no excusing those first two problems that I mentioned, but they could at least be understood and tolerated if the show was actually good. But that's not the case. Creature Commandos is not a bad show, but it's not that great either. It's probably a solid 7 or 7.5 out of 10, and I understand that that rating is just going by the first two episodes, but Warner Brothers Discovery did choose to release this show in staggered format versus in its entirety. So as of now, those two episodes do speak for the entirety of the DCU and must be judged as such. The show, as of now, seems to basically be a second-rate redo of James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, with echoes of Guardians of the Galaxy, but with different characters. Probably the most blatant examples of that are the dispatching of murdering, wisecracking, irreverent outsiders to conduct a secret mission on foreign soil, the fact that a yellow shirt-wearing Rick Flag character, senior versus junior this time, leads the team, and the obvious way that G.I. Robot is set up to be this series' Groot character. Only instead of "I am Groot," his catchphrase is about how he loves killing Nazis. The story is decent, but not much different from what we already got in the Suicide Squad, or to a lesser degree, Peacemaker or Guardians of the Galaxy. The animation is mid at the very best, nowhere close to what you'll see in a more masterful R-rated cartoon like, let's say, Invincible. Fourth and finally, Creature Commandos is too connected to the DCEU. James Gunn has gone on record as saying that he wrote Creature Commandos and his upcoming film Superman before he became one of the heads of the DC studios and before the DCU was a thing. Creature Commandos was intended to tie in to his Peacemaker and Waller and the Suicide Squad projects, and debatably his Superman project also. Then, once James Gunn was installed as one of the heads of DC Studios and the creative architect of the DCU, and once he was given the task of hard rebooting the DCEU to clear the deck for the DCU, he naturally decided that he didn't want to do that because it would mean deleting his stuff, the stuff that he wrote and planned for the DCEU. So he decided instead to do a soft reboot, which is a euphemistic way of saying that he decided instead to delete every DCEU project that he didn't write or didn't like, keep the stuff that he did, release the stuff that he'd already planned, and hope that the audience wouldn't be confused. And as you can imagine, it was a very bad idea, at least if the first 2 episodes of Creature Commandos are any indication. Creature Commandos is very much in continuity with James Gunn's The Suicide Squad and Peacemaker, which themselves are very much in continuity with the rest of the DCEU. So this show is going to be a point of major and unnecessary confusion to anyone who goes into it without knowing the full behind-the-scenes story of its release and expecting it to be the first project in a totally new cinematic universe that is totally broken from the last one. So, yeah. In the end, Creature Commandos is a TV/streaming series that aims to heavily inform the DCU's theatrical films, but that probably won't be watched by most people who watch those films. It'll only appeal to a small group in the already limited audience of people who might watch it. Its overt continuity links to the cinematic universe that it's supposed to be rebooting will probably confuse another portion still of its already limited audience. And it's not even that good a series. When you consider all those things, I trust you can agree that this project should not have been the one to literally introduce the DCU, a cinematic universe that already has most potential audience members skeptical. Like, for reference, just imagine how disheartened potential MCU fans would have been in 2008 if the MCU had started with She-Hulk before Iron Man. Just really, Creature Commandos shouldn't even have been made at this point. Or at most, it should have been released quietly as a direct-to-DVD animated movie. This series probably wouldn't even be getting half its fanfare were it not for how James Gunn is using his position in DC Studios to promote it like it's the godfather of comic book animation and hijacking the good press around actual masterpieces like The Penguin to do it. At any rate, that's just my opinion, though I think it tracks well with the facts. Let me know yours, sound off in the comments below, and tell me what you think. Meanwhile, if you liked this video and made it this far, don't forget to leave a like, click subscribe, ring that bell, and hey, follow me on social media as well. So long.